All right, so today we are looking at PowerPoint 6 here. It's our day 7. It's always on the second half of class that everything, gets the numbering system gets a little goofed up. So today we are looking. So we've talked about the kinetic chain, right? We build our foundation for movement. We started with our skeletal system so that we get a framework, and then we talked about how to move that skeletal system with our muscular system, and then we talked about how to control it with our nervous system. So we've built the framework for movement throughout the body, but now we got to make sure that that body has plenty of energy and that it can deliver all of that energy and nutrients throughout the body. So the next half of this class is going to be the anatomy and physiology related to a couple different systems. So we're going to look at the heart today. We're also going to get into like our lungs, and then we're going to get a little bit into the digestive system before we finally end up by talking about metabolism. So that's kind of the second half of this course. That's the hill we're headed down. And the points we're going to hit along it. So it's funny, we're talking about the heart and disease today, and the heart and blood vessels today, because that's like the hollow network of tubes that's going to allow us to transport nutrients. Tomorrow we'll start talking about the first type of nutrients that we gather. We'll start by talking about like the respiratory system, because the respiratory system and the heart do work very intimately together. But if you look at their function, they're very, very, very different. Like the heart is like a freaking shuttle bus, but the respiratory system is like gathering nutrients, which is not similar in terms of function at all, even though they definitely rely on each other. Your heart needs to get those nutrients from your lung, and your lungs can't deliver anything on their own. So we definitely talk about the cardiorespiratory system and how those two things function together all the time. But what's interesting is we're going to be talking about our digestive system right after we talk about respiratory system. And if you think about it, the respiratory system and the digestive system are actually more interlinked than the heart and the lungs are, because the digestive system is all about extracting nutrients in the form of like glucose and proteins, amino acids, and things like that. And the respiratory system is all about extracting oxygen. Both of those are necessary for metabolism. So in a weird way, there's actually a stronger connection between those two systems. And then we'll finally finish by talking about like what the heck is metabolism. We've been talking about it like crazy all throughout this whole class. Then we'll talk about like how we produce ATP and things like that. So there's our intro for the second half of class here. Let's go ahead and get a, I forgot, I was opening up my, I was like, what book were you talking about, Maggie? Let's go here and watch a quick video on the heart. Cardiovascular. All right, talking about pressure. See, I will respectfully listen to the whole video and all the credits, but you don't get to make me listen to the ads. All right, here we go.
Heart, that throbbing, beating muscle, is probably the most iconic organ in your body. No other organ gets its own holiday or as much radio play, and you're unlikely to get a love note decorated with a kidney or a spleen or even a brain, which is really what rules the emotions. Don't get me wrong, the heart does some great things. Namely, it powers the entire circulatory system, transporting nutrients, oxygen, waste, heat, hormones, and immune cells throughout the body over and over. But in the end, the heart does not make you love. It doesn't break apart if you get dumped by your boo. It's not a lonely hunter. The truth is, the heart is really just a pump, a big, wet, muscly brute of a pump. And it doesn't care about poetry or chocolate or why you're crying. The heart has only one concern: maintaining pressure. If you've ever squeezed the trigger on a squirt gun or opened a can of shaken soda, you've seen how fluids flow from areas of high pressure, like inside the gun or the can, to areas of low pressure, like outside. The heart's entire purpose is to maintain that same kind of pressure gradient by generating high hydrostatic pressure to pump blood out of the heart while also creating low pressure to bring it back in. That gradient of force is what we mean when we talk about blood pressure. It's basically a measure of the amount of strain your arteries feel as your heart moves your blood around. More than 5 liters of it at about 60 beats per minute. That's about 100,000 beats a day, 35 million a year, 2 to 3 billion heartbeats in a lifetime. The basic physiology of which you can easily feel just by taking your own pulse. I don't have a watch. Now that might not inspire so much poetry. It turns out it's still a pretty good story. Let us begin with a little anatomy. Unless you happen to be of the Grinch persuasion, the average adult human heart is about the size of two fists clasped together. One of the few bits of trivia you often hear about human anatomy that is actually true. The heart is hollow, vaguely cone-shaped, and weighs only about 250 to 350 grams, a pretty modest size for your body's greatest workhorse. And although Americans tend to put their right hand over their left breast while pledging allegiance, the heart is actually situated pretty much in the center of your chest, snuggled in the mediastinum cavity between your lungs. It sits at an angle, though, with one end pointing inferiorly toward the left hip and the other toward the right shoulder, so most of its mass rests just a little bit left of the mid-sternal line. The heart is nestled in a double-walled sac called the pericardium. The tough outer layer, or fibrous pericardium, is made of dense connective tissue and helps protect the heart while anchoring it to some of the surrounding structures, so it doesn't let it bounce all over the place while it's beating. Meanwhile, the inner serous pericardium consists of an inner visceral layer, or epicardium, which is actually part of the heart wall, and an outer parietal layer. These two layers are separated by a thick film of fluid that acts like a natural lubricant, providing a slippery environment for the heart to move around in so it doesn't create friction as it beats. The wall of the heart itself is made of yet more layers, 3 of them. That epicardium on the outside, the myocardium in the middle, which is mainly composed of cardiac muscle tissue that does all the work of contracting, and the innermost endocardium, a thin white layer of squamous epithelial tissue. Deeper inside, the heart has a whole lot of moving pieces that I'm not going to pick apart here, because the really big thing to understand is how the general system of chambers and valves and veins and arteries all work together to circulate blood around your body. Of course, fluid likes to move from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure, and the heart creates those pressures. Form, once again, following function. Your heart is divided laterally into 2 sides by a thin inner partition called the septum. This division creates 4 chambers, 2 superior atria, which are the low pressure areas, and 2 inferior ventricles that produce the high pressures. Each chamber has a corresponding valve, which acts like a bouncer at a club at closing time, like he'll let you out, but not back in. When a valve opens, blood flows in one direction into the next chamber, and when it closes, that's it. No blood can just flow back into the chamber it just left. So if you put your ear against someone's chest, and yeah, ask for permission first, you'll hear that lub-dub, lub-dub. What you're really hearing are the person's heart valves opening and closing. It's a relatively simple but quite elegant setup, really. Functionally, those atria are the receiving chambers for the blood coming back to the heart after circulating through the body. The ventricles, meanwhile, are the discharging chambers that push the blood back out of the heart. As a result, the atria are pretty thin-walled because the blood flows back into the heart under low pressure, and all those atria have to do is push it down into the relaxed ventricles, doesn't take a whole lot of effort. The ventricles are beastly by comparison. They're the true pumps of the heart, and they need big, strong walls to shoot blood back out of the heart with every contraction. And the whole thing is connected to the rest of your circulatory system by way of arteries and veins. We'll go into a whole lot more detail about these later, but the thing to remember first, if you don't already remember it, is that arteries carry blood away from the heart, and veins carry it back toward the heart. To differentiate the two, anatomy diagrams typically depict arteries in red while veins are drawn in blue, which incidentally is part of what has led to the common misconception that your blood is actually blue at some point, but it isn't. It is always red. It's just a brighter red when there's oxygen in it. So let's look at how all this comes together, starting with a big burst of blood flowing out of your heart. The right ventricle pumps blood through the pulmonary semilunar valve into the pulmonary trunk, which is just a big vessel that splits to form the left and right pulmonary arteries. From there, and this is the only time in your body where deoxygenated blood goes through an artery, the blood goes straight through the pulmonary artery into the lungs where it can pick up oxygen. It finds its way into very small, thin-walled capillaries, which allow materials to move in and out of the bloodstream. In the case of the lungs, oxygen moves in and carbon dioxide moves out. The blood then circles back to the heart by way of 4 pulmonary veins, where it keeps moving to the area of lowest pressure, because that is what fluids do. And in this case, that's the inside of the relaxed left atrium. Then the atrium contracts, which increases the pressure, so the blood passes down through the mitral valve into the left ventricle. So the thing that just happened here, where a wave of blood was pumped from the right ventricle to the lungs and then followed the lowest pressure back to the left atrium, there's a name for that. It is the pulmonary circulation loop. It's how your blood unloads its burden of carbon dioxide into the lungs and trades it in for a batch of fresh oxygen. It's short, it's simple, at least in the way I have time to describe it, and it's just delightfully effective. Of all the substances you need to continue existing, oxygen is the most urgent, the one without which you will die in minutes instead of hours or days or weeks. But it's pretty useless unless the oxygen can actually reach your cells, and that hasn't happened yet. For that, your newly oxygenated blood needs to travel through the rest of your organ systems and share the wealth. And that fantastic journey, known as the systemic loop, begins in the left ventricle when it flexes to increase pressure. Now, the blood would like to flow into the nice low-pressure left atrium where it just came from, but the mitral valve slams shut, forcing it through the aortic semilunar valve into your body's largest artery, nearly as big around as a garden hose, the aorta, which sends it to the rest of your body. And after all your various greedy muscles and neurons and organs and the heart itself have had their oxygen feast at the capillary bed buffet, that now oxygen-poor blood loops back to the heart, entering through the big superior and inferior vena cava veins straight into the right atrium. And when the right atrium contracts, the blood passes through the tricuspid valve into the relaxed right ventricle and right back to where we started. This whole double loop cycle plays out like a giant figure eight, heart to lung to heart to body to heart again, and runs off that constant high pressure, low pressure gradient exchange regulated by the heart valves. So the first lub that you hear in that lub dub is made by the mitral and tricuspid valves closing. And they do that because your ventricles contract to build up pressure and pump blood out of the heart. This high pressure caused by ventricular contraction is called systole. Now, the dub sound. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about dubstep sounds. That's the aortic and pulmonary semilunar valves closing at the start of diastole. That's when the ventricles relax to receive the next volume of blood from the atria. When those valves close, the high pressure blood that's leaving the heart tries to rush back in, but runs into the valves. So you know when you get your blood pressure measured and the nurse gives you two numbers, like 120/80. The first number is your systolic blood pressure, essentially the peak pressure produced by the contracting ventricles that push blood out to all of your tissues. The second reading is your diastolic blood pressure, which is the pressure in your arteries when the ventricles are relaxed. These two numbers give your nurse a sense of how your arteries and ventricles are doing when they're experiencing both high pressure, the systolic, and low pressure, the diastolic. So if your systolic blood pressure is too low, that could mean that, say, the volume of your blood is too low, like maybe you've lost a lot of blood or you're dehydrated. And if your diastolic is too high, that could mean that your blood pressure is high even when it's supposed to be lower. Considering how much we talk about the importance of homeostasis, it should come as no surprise that blood pressure that's too high or too low, or anything that affects your blood's ability to move oxygen around, can be dangerous. Prolonged high blood pressure can damage arterial walls, mess with your circulation, and ultimately endanger your heart, your lungs, brain, kidneys, and nearly every part of you. So I guess you could say that the best way to break a heart is to mess with its pressure. But good luck trying to write a song about that. Today you learned how the heart's ventricles, atria, and valves create a pump that maintains both high and low pressure to circulate blood from the heart to the body through your arteries and bring it back to the heart through your veins. We also talked about what systolic and diastolic blood pressure are and how they're measured. Thanks to our headmaster of learning, Thomas Frank, and to all of our Patreon patrons who help make Crash Course possible for free through their monthly contributions. If you like Crash Course and you want to help us keep making these videos and also maybe want to get some cool stuff, you can check out patreon.com/Crash Course. Crash Course is filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney Crash Course studio. This episode was written by Kathleen Yale, edited by Blake Tibastino, and our consultant is Dr. Brandon Jackson. It was directed by Nicholas Jenkins. The script supervisor and editor is Nicole Sweeney. Our sound designer is Michael Aranda, and the graphics team is Thought Cafe.
Okay. So, a lot of new terms in the heart. So let's go ahead and go over them real quick. So what we are going to be looking at today, we want to understand like the structure of the heart. Obviously, that's going to be important. We need to understand the form if we're going to be able to understand how it functions. Then we'll look a little bit at like cardiac cycle. We'll talk about what the difference between a contraction and a relaxation is. Those are known as like systole and diastole. And then arguably the most important thing that we'll talk about today is our cardiac output. We're going to look at the function of the heart, or at least how we measure the function of the heart. We'll talk very brief. I mean, we're probably not going to spend too much time talking about diseases, even though coronary heart disease is a big one in our industry. And yeah, that's really what we're going to kind of be going over here. So you'll notice again, like this, you can tell it's a medical textbook, because it's like, what about heart rhythm sounds? Like, what's the heart supposed to sound like? And it's like, you know, we're not listening to the heart. So we're just making it get us through those laps. So let's go ahead and define the heart here. So your heart is going to be a muscular blood pumping organ that is responsible for creating pressure gradients to pump blood and nutrients throughout the body. So if you think about that, right, like the heart is composed of several chambers which contract to create areas of high pressure and areas of low pressure in order to promote blood flow. So that's how your body's heart does this, right? It is made up of like cardiac muscle, right? Which is similar to skeletal muscle, right? It's somewhat similar to skeletal muscle. It's kind of like a mixture between skeletal muscle and smooth muscle, right? Skeletal muscle has a lot of contractile proteins. It produces a lot of energy. Usually they're big and bursty in terms of energy, meaning they're really good at like producing strong contractions over like relatively shorter periods of time. But your heart muscle, your cardiac muscle, doesn't have quite as many like myofilaments. It can't contract quite as hard. You know, it's not gonna be able to squat 1,000 pounds or anything like that. But your heart muscle is going to be able to continue those contractions regularly over really long periods of time. That period of time being, your entire life. So like that's definitely like a very type 1 fiber situation. So it's going to look slightly different because it has to function ever so slightly differently. Now, we're also going to talk very much about your circulatory system today. And so your circulatory system is going to be connected to this, right? So we'll put that over here. The circulatory system, right? And that's going to be a continuous one-way circuit. Continuous one-way circuit of blood vessels through which blood is pumped by the heart. Okay, so that's technically its own little system, right? Like your heart is this individual organ. Your blood vessels are also kind of their own organ, right? And then we have like blood as well, right? And so we'll put blood up here. And so blood is going to be the medium. Actually, hold on. Actually, I want to give a little sub note for this as well. So your circulatory system, one-way circuit of blood vessels through which blood is pumped, right? So this provides a means by which blood can travel throughout the body, right? So the heart is pumping, but it's connected to the blood vessels so they can actually deliver everything. Then blood, which I don't think, is going to be the medium by which oxygen and other nutrients are delivered throughout the body. Blood cells, right, which are called erythrocytes, those are your red blood cells. They're really good at having like these specialized proteins in them that allow them to actually, carry everything. And so like blood cells are specially designed to effectively carry nutrients and exchange those nutrients at the body's tissue level. So blood's really, really great at being able to like exchange everything. So these are three kind of main sections. These are the three things that we're mainly talking about today, right? The heart, your circulatory system, which are all of your blood vessels. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to say this. And the other is because we're going to see a parallel here in just a minute. And blood, right? So the heart, circulatory system, and blood. So all of that comes together. For those of you who have taken like our previous classes where we've already talked a lot about the cardiovascular system, this is really what we're describing. And we're going to see this actually when we kind of cap everything together. I believe tomorrow is when we're doing. Actually, let me take a look here just really quick. Today is 6. Yeah, so we got kind of a little half PowerPoint that we're going to do in addition tomorrow. It's a little extra one. So we'll have 2 PowerPoints tomorrow technically where we kind of cap these two things together. So this is where we describe the cardiovascular system, and that's actually what I'm going to put here. So the cardiovascular system, right, is a system consisting of the heart, blood, and blood vessels that is responsible for delivering nutrients throughout the body. Okay, and that's really like the main, that's what we're actually talking about today, right? That's your cardiovascular system. If we were talking about the cardiorespiratory system, we would be talking about the lungs and how they work together with the heart. So we're starting to see, you know, your support systems are much more interlinked, you know, like you have your, in the same way that yesterday, or I'm sorry, at the end of last week, we were talking about the neuromuscular system, which is the nervous and the muscular working together, or the musculoskeletal system, which is the muscular system and the skeletal system working together. Cardiovascular system is all of this, right? So let's go ahead and start by talking about the heart. So we're going to kind of go back and really get to the star of the show here, and look at the heart and some of its information, right? So it is located between your lungs. That area is called your mediastinum. And when we look at that, that's like right about here. He mentioned in the video, right, it is actually dead center in your chest, but it is kind of heavy on the left side because the left side of your heart is much more muscular. So because it's much more muscular, it kind of tilts to the left there. And that's kind of what makes us put our hand over our left side. But you can even see that right here. It's kind of pointing. This little point right here is referred to as the apex of the heart. And like I said, it does point kind of off in this direction here. And the reason this is so much more muscular is because this left side of your heart is what we call the systemic side of your heart. And so this is pumping blood out of the heart through all of the other systems of the body. This is like sending it throughout to deliver oxygen. And it's going to squeeze out of here. It's going to shoot up this, what's called your aortic arch. Some of that's going to travel behind the heart down some tubes and then go to your digestive system and eventually get to your legs. You can see these ones are going to branch out and go to your arms, and then you get some that are going to go up on either side of your head there to get oxygen to your brain. So we want this side, the left side of your heart, to be more muscular because like it's got to pump blood over pretty long distances. It has to pump it against gravity to get it up to my head. If I were hanging upside down, you know, it'd have to pump against gravity all the way to my legs, which is a really like long distance, right? But luckily your heart can handle the job. It's pretty good at it. And so the left side is very, very muscular, whereas the right side actually is what pumps blood into your pulmonary circuit, which is heading to your lungs. And so this is going to branch out and go into the lungs here and here, and then all that's going to come back in and gather in both directions, right? Like once it gets back from the body, it's going to dump into that right side so that it can get to the lungs. And once it comes back from the right side, it's going to bump into the left side so they can get to the body. I moved really quickly through that, but I will make it more clear as we go. So that is, right now we're just at the hard part. So that's the heart, right? Like that's the pump that's making all of this happen. And so the heart is going to be made up of a couple different layers here. All of them are important, but one of them is arguably the more important of the three. So you're going to see what's called your endocardium. You might know some of these terms, by the way. Remember, we've seen like endo before, right? That means innermost, and that's exactly what this is. It's the innermost layer of the heart, right? And the endocardium is really really slick. It's meant to be this very, very smooth section of the heart because like when blood cells are in there, they're going to kind of stay in their liquid form because they don't have anything to grab onto. There's nothing on the walls that has like a lot of texture for them to kind of grab because your endocardium is really, really smooth. And so they'll just get pumped right back out and kind of stay in their liquid form. That's the thing about blood cells that you kind of have to remember. We think of blood as like a liquid, and it is. I mean, it is considered liquid connective tissue, actually. But like it's, you know, it is a series of little tiny blood cells, which means like, you know, those blood cells have these little proteins in them that allow them to coagulate. That's why we have scabs and things like that. It's a protective mechanism. So, you know, if those blood cells grab onto something and they get a little grip and then another one grabs onto that one, another one grabs onto that one, you start to experience like clotting. And we certainly don't want that to happen on the inside of our heart. So our endocardium is really, really, it's the smooth innermost layer of the heart. And then we have our myocardium. This is the one that I argue is the most important. But the myocardium is the middle layer. Actually, I should say the thick middle layer of the heart, comprised of heart muscle. So that's where we get the term myo from, right? Myo for muscle, cardium because we're talking about the heart. And so this is the muscular part of the heart. This is where the heavy lifting of the heart's contractions take place, right? So your myocardium is how your heart's able to actually like contract and stuff. This is what's using most of the energy. This is what when you look at like your coronary arteries, which are arteries that deliver oxygen to your heart, this is where they're delivering that oxygen to. This is the stuff that we want to keep alive. And then you also have your epicardium, which is the outermost layer, and that's just because like any other type of tissue, we have to have an outer layer in order to like keep everything in. And so the epicardium is the thin outermost layer of the heart that makes up the heart's, oh my God, I'm forgetting the word I want to say. The outside border, the membrane, walls. Whew! Oh boy. Does anybody smell burnt toast? Okay. So those are the main layers of the heart. Now, there is one more special layer that is not technically part of the heart itself, but it's, you know, it's the only time we're going to talk about it is when we're talking about the heart. And that is your pericardium. And your pericardium is actually this layer right here. You can kind of see it. Notice how like this drawing is kind of weird. You're like, what the heck is this like? Why is there this tan color around the outside of the heart there? That's your pericardium. And so the pericardium is this kind of fibrous sac. So your pericardium is a fibrous, man, I keep doing that. A fibrous sac that encloses the heart and holds it in place. So, you know, we've got our heart situated between our lungs, right? Like if we go back and look at our mediastinum, like there's some connection here, right? Like, you know, this stuff is touching this stuff. So luckily we have this fibrous sac that kind of holds our heart in place, and it's really slick. It has these serous layers that have this kind of, it's kind of gooey and viscous in nature, and that's a really good thing because that allows like, you know, sliding to happen inside of that sac. You know, we got all these different layers and the heart's contracting and it's changing shape all the time, right? Well, I don't want like my sac to get pulled and get a fold in it randomly, and then all of a sudden like my heart can't expand because it can't move, or you know, we don't want it to like touch your lung and get stuck to your lung, and then all of a sudden you open up your diaphragm and your lung, you know, your lungs expand or contract, and like all of a sudden your heart's getting moved with that. We want some connection there, but we don't want it to get sticky, right? And it actually can get sticky. That's actually what like you'll hear about like infections. If you watch like medical TV dramas, you'll hear about somebody who has like pericarditis. And what that is basically like fluid, and it's an infection of your pericardial cavity. And so what'll happen is like because of that infection, it'll lose its slickness. And then it starts like getting stuck to things, and your heart can't move the way it's supposed to. It's really, 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 really dangerous. So that's your pericardium. It's the sac that kind of holds everything in place. Now, when you look at the myocardium, we're going to kind of go back and add a couple little notes into the myocardium here. So your myocardium is actually what we're talking about when we talk about like cardiac muscle, right? So actually, you know what we can do? We can put it over here. So we can say cardiac muscle, right, is going to be the myocardium, right? And so this is going to be lightly striated, meaning it does have overlapping layers of proteins that allow it to contract, but it has single nucleus cells, which is kind of cool. And that's, remember, the nucleus is like the brain of all of your cells, right? And so when it comes to like your muscle cells working together, because they don't have quite as many brains and they don't have as many like, you know, too many cooks in the kitchen, there's really just like one person who's like, everybody's doing this because I said so. And all the fibers are great, yeah, I'm fine with that. And they all contract at the same time. So luckily, like having less nuclei means that there's going to be less likelihood for your heart to not be able to contract simultaneously. We want all of our fibers to contract simultaneously. That's one of the biggest things we have to remember about our cardiac muscle, right? Is that when we want our heart to contract, we want it to contract as hard as it can, consistently, for the same amount of force at the same rhythm. And we want all the fibers to work together so that they can create maximum pressure. If I've got some fibers over here that are lagging behind compared to my fibers over here, the rhythm of my heart is going to reduce. And if that happens, that means that like my heart's not going to be able to generate pressure very effectively. If I can't generate pressure very effectively, I can't deliver oxygen where I need it to get to. And that will often cause me to expire. So we definitely want to have cardiac muscle that have these single nuclei, lightly striated, single nuclei, which is the plural there, controlled involuntarily, and they have intercalated discs. So this is another thing that's kind of cool. They have these what are called intercalated discs, which you can kind of see here, these little discs right here. Those actually allow electric signals to travel throughout your heart a little more easily and effectively. And so that can actually, you can see there's like a nucleus there and there. You know, it's not that they aren't around, it's just that they control like a really large section of those fibers. And so you can see, you know, you can see all the waves here. Those are the striations. You can see the little intercalated discs. You can see the nuclei, right? That allows your heart to conduct electricity incredibly well compared to like a lot of other tissues. So we're going to come back to this term when we look at this, right? We're going to look at these intercalated discs, and we're going to look at being controlled involuntarily here in just a little bit when we start talking about our heart's rhythm. But for now, that is very much, you know, your cardiac muscle, your myocardium section. I think I lied. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw this up under here. I know I'm screwing up the notes. I apologize if you're following along, but I'm picky. But wait. Yeah, I think we're going to do that. All right. So let's go ahead and look at the heart's chambers, right? So now we're going to go chambers of the heart, which is the sound of like Chambers of the Heart was the title of my first love novel. So the chambers of the heart, we got to remember that it's like divided into, it's sort of it's a double pump, right? So when we're looking at this, right, you have a right side, which is going to pump low oxygen blood to your lungs. This is what's called your pulmonary circuit. And you've got a left side, which is going to pump blood throughout the rest of your body, the rest of the system. That's your systemic circuit, right? So when we look at that, those are the two primary like sections, right? And you can kind of see it if I go over here. By the way, and I think I've mentioned this before in previous classes, but Raul, this is going to be your first time hearing this. You got to remember that the heart drawings are drawn from the anatomic position. And the anatomic position is like the person, right? Like I'd be standing like this. So this on the left is the right side of the heart, and this on the right is the left side of the heart, because the person is facing this way. Okay. Right?
Yeah.
So I always tell this story because and the reason I make such a big deal out of this is because I must have been skipping class, or I must have been late or something, but I literally just missed my teachers like teaching me that the first time I ever learned about the heart, and I just sat there confused for like a week. Like the first time I was ever studying the heart, I was like, all of my textbook drawings are backwards, or I'm crazy. I have it in my notes, the teacher said it, and yet the drawing is wrong, and I just didn't come to the conclusion. Like you know, you get convinced that you're wrong and then you just stay wrong.
Yeah.
Super there. So I always try to take like a minute to be like, all right. So looking at these double pumps, right? So we've got two sections here. We've got of our chambers of the heart. You're going to have your you're going to look at your pulmonary circuit, right, which is responsible for pumping blood to the lungs, right? And that is going to consist of your right atrium. And actually, you know, what I'll do is we'll say that is the right side of the heart. Okay, and so that's going to consist of your right atrium. Okay, your right atrium is going to is the chamber that receives oxygen that is receives blood that is returning from the body. Okay, so your right atrium is getting blood that's returning from the body. That means that it is low oxygen blood. It's low oxygen because it's already spent all this time delivering all that oxygen. This is where, you know, we see like this bluish color here. We label it blue because when you know, we don't, he mentioned the video, but we never have blue blood throughout our body. You either have really dark blood, which is like the super dark red color, or you have super bright red blood, which is what you see whenever you cut yourself. And that's why, you know, because there's just tons of oxygen in the air, so all your red blood cells are like, wow, cool, and they pick up all this oxygen, so they turns bright red. And that is even more true. You'll even see this actually more like happen more rapidly and be more true at sea level compared to like cutting yourself if you were like, you know, at high elevation, which is kind of funny. But that's the thing. There's never like blue blood throughout your body. But when you mix like the pigment of skin with like a super dark like red color, it looks kind of bluish under your veins and stuff. And that's why we kind of see that bluish color there. Or like when somebody is like suffocating, one of the things you look for is to see if their lips are turning blue. That's like a sign that they're not getting oxygen. And so it's like clearly something's blocking their windpipe. And so that's when you know you gotta, you know, do oh my god, the thing that I have to do every 2 years as part of my CPR. Oh my god, what's that called? Man, I'm just blinking out words.
Compressions.
Oh, not those compressions. I mean, yes, that's true, but the Heimlich maneuver. Woo! Oh no. Every 2 years.
It's Monday.
Yeah, I guess. Good God. All right, so that's your right atrium. Now, an atrium is something that gathers blood, right? And so the atrium is the chamber that's gathering blood as it returns from the body. Now, your next part of the pulmonary circuit is going to be your right ventricle, okay? So your right ventricle is the chamber of the heart responsible for ejecting blood out of the heart towards the lungs, okay? So when we look at that, right, your right atrium is always going to connect to your right ventricle. You can think of your atriums as like a gathering site, right? Like if you even think of like, if you look up the word atrium, you know, you're going to see it says like a gathering place for stuff. Oh yeah, it's going to show you the atrium for like the bird atrium over in Pasadena. So an atrium, yeah, is an open-roofed entrance or central court. Yeah, it's like a place where people like gather, but more accurately to our world, it's where blood gathers so that it can get pumped, right? This is blood that's returning. So it returns to the heart and gets gathered in an atrium. Then it gets pumped out of the heart with a ventricle. So atriums are gathering sites, ventricles are pumps. And so right atrium is going to connect to the right ventricle in the pulmonary circuit to gather low oxygenated blood. And because it's low oxygenated, where do we need to get it? We need to get it over to the lungs so it can pick up some new oxygen. And that's your pulmonary circuit there. Now you also have your systemic circuit, right? And so the systemic circuit, I don't need to put the word the, is going to be responsible for pumping blood throughout the body, right? And so this is the left side of the heart, and it consists of your left atrium, which we'll go back over here. Your left atrium, I'll leave that is going to gather blood that is returning from the lungs. Okay, actually gather actually we'll say, I want to use the same sentence, the chamber that receives blood that is returning from the lungs. So because it's from the lungs, this is high oxygen blood, right? So this just got back from the lungs. So my lungs drop it off into my left atrium, and now arguably the most important part of the heart, your left ventricle. I mean, none of your heart could function if all of these were not equally important, but the left ventricle is definitely the one that we measure and the one that we talk about all the time, because your left ventricle has got to get blood all the way from my heart down to my right pinky toe, which is not close. So, you know, this is a pretty important chamber. So this is going to be the chamber of the heart responsible for ejecting blood out of the heart towards the entire body. So your left ventricle has got to pump it quite a long distance. And that's why this is the most muscular section of the heart. So those are each of your individual chambers there, right? And so we're looking at this kind of like constant figure eight motion. It's like a double figure eight, actually. Because like let's say you got like a brand new red blood cell, right? So your blood cells, they get produced in your skeletal system. So let's say my femur makes a new blood cell. It's that blood cell's first day on the job. You know, first thing it's got to do is it's got to work its way to the heart in order to like start carrying oxygen and nutrients. And so that blood cell comes all the way to the heart and it drops into my right atrium, right? Because it's low oxygen because it's never really picked up oxygen before. So it goes to the right atrium first. Then the right atrium is going to open up and allow blood to drop into my right ventricle. Then my heart's going to contract, and that right ventricle is going to pump blood out of my right ventricle into my lungs. And so now that red blood cell just picked up its first unit of oxygen. And now my heart's going to relax, which will draw blood back into my left atrium where it will get gathered. And then that blood cell is going to drop into the left ventricle where it will then contract, and it will send that oxygen, that blood cell, wherever it's going. And maybe it delivers some oxygen to my quadriceps while I'm doing some walking lunges, right? And now all that oxygen's been used up. It dropped it all off. So it's got to get all the way back to the right atrium to get to the right ventricle to get back to the lungs. And it'll drop off all of the CO2 that my lunges had created. It'll pick up some new oxygen, and that process will repeat until that red blood cell dies. So it goes from heart to lungs to heart to body to heart to lungs to heart to body. It's kind of like this constant double figure eight. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool.
Hey, Brad, I was gonna ask, when you drink coffee, what part of the heart is the part that like where sometimes you feel like your heart pumping like extra hard, or is it
yeah, so that's because caffeine. That's because of a couple different things. Caffeine does tend to amp up certain systems, so it activates parts of your sympathetic nervous system. It's not so much that coffee does anything to the heart. It's that coffee does things to your sympathetic nervous system, and then your sympathetic nervous system, activates your heart, because like your sympathetic nervous system is in charge of fight or flight responses, right? So, by activating that part of your nervous system, it's like, why do we have so much energy? Are we running from something right now? So then your heart goes, I don't know, maybe. And then it starts pumping, right?
Okay.
It's not that caffeine runs through your heart and then makes your heart go crazy. It's just caffeine activates that part of your nervous system.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we do also have a series of valves. Luckily, you guys don't have to have these valves memorized, but I will mention them really quickly. You've got 4 special valves, and the valves are super important, by the way. Like I'm actually just going to keep this up because there's not new notes, but the valves are arguably one of the most important. I mean, I keep saying arguably the most important part. All of this is important, but like the valves are how we generate pressure, right? Like if you like experience hypertrophy of your heart, right? Remember, hypertrophy means like growth, right? That's muscular growth. We actually don't want that to happen in our heart. Like we want our muscles to grow. We do not want our heart muscle to grow. We want our heart muscle to remain the same size. Because you would think, like when you think larger muscles, you know, generally it's a positive. You're like, yeah, larger muscles, stronger muscles, great. But in your heart, if your heart gets bigger, the problem is the myocardium gets bigger, right? Like all this muscular section here, this stuff gets bigger. But the chambers, they don't have smooth muscle tissues. So they're not going to be able to like grow with the heart. So if your heart gets bigger and bigger and bigger, eventually what happens is it starts to either crowd these valves or it starts to pull them apart. And now, if those valves can't like close anymore, you are leaking blood throughout your heart. And that means that you're going to lose massive amounts of pressure. Because how we create pressure is by closing things down. Normally in class, I love to do this big silly thing where I have a bottle of water. And I'm sure you guys have done this, where you have like a mostly drunk bottle of water, but there's a little bit left in. And then you take and you twist it, and like you leave the lid on and it creates all this pressure, and then you pop the lid off and it goes shooting off like 20 feet in the air. It's always kind of fun. That just shows you like how pressure works, right? Like I created a bunch of pressure by squeezing air into a very small space. The same thing's happening with blood here, right? When you've got a chamber that's closed down, but then your heart squeezes, all of a sudden pressure builds up. And then as soon as that valve opens up, blood goes ejecting out of the heart at a faster speed with more pressure. So we need to have these valves closed down. We've got a valve on each of our different chambers here. I want blood to rush from my right atrium into my right ventricle. So I'm going to have a valve that closes this down. And when my heart squeezes and relaxes, right, that squeezing is going to shoot that blood from this chamber into this chamber. Meanwhile, this valve is going to close down. Then this one's also going to close down. So my heart's going to squeeze, and now pressure is going to build up, and it's going to go shooting out, right? And the same thing is going to happen in both directions. So those are your valves, right? You have your AV valves, those are your atrioventricular valves, and you've got your semilunar valves, right? Which they look just slightly different. Like some of them are like, double flaps, you got a triple flap. You got a weird tricuspid valve, which is like this kind of interesting looking one here. But they kind of look like this, right? These little chambers here, right? Double flap, triple flap. And then you've got like these kind of long, skinny ones that kind of close like that. But those valves there are super, super important. Now, something that does very much affect us in our industry is looking at like how we supply blood to the heart. We're one of the most dangerous things in the US, but really just in most developed worlds, is coronary heart disease. This is the #1 leading cause of death in the US. And so we have to make sure that we are supplying plenty of blood to our myocardium. So if we're looking at blood supply to the heart, right? Whoops, nope, don't want to do that. We got to look at what are called your coronary arteries. So we haven't really talked too much about arteries just yet, but arteries are blood vessels that go away from the heart. In this case, this is sometimes a little hard to understand because like they're arteries because they did come out of the heart, but they also like wrap right back around to the heart itself, around the outside of the heart. So they're not in the chambers of the heart. They're actually like kind of penetrating those walls to deliver blood to the myocardium. So they are still an artery, just like any other artery. Like it's blood that came out of the inside of the heart, but then they wrapped around and they're supplying blood to the outside of the heart. Because it's the outside of the heart, it's like any other tissue throughout the body. It's like your calves or whatever. So your myocardium is the part that's actually contracting, which means it's the part that needs to produce energy all the time, which means it is what needs the most blood flow. Your heart can't just like passively absorb blood inside the chambers. The muscular layer is what needs to have oxygen delivery. And so that's why we have our coronary arteries, which are arteries that supply the myocardium with sufficient oxygen, and nutrients, right? You've also got coronary veins, which are going to, you know, gather that blood and then send it back to where it's got to go. So your coronary veins are going to gather it and head right back into the chambers of the heart there, so that, you know, those blood cells can get some new oxygen. So here's what they kind of look like, right? This is how the heart is supplying itself with blood vessels, and this is exactly what blood vessels look like in the rest of your body as well. You know, the blood vessels just kind of wrap around tissues so that they can deliver, you know, this little red section deliver an oxygen throughout all this like area of tissue here. And here's what your coronary arteries look like. They also kind of have some interesting little valves on them. And that's a very good thing, specifically on your aortic valve, which is your aortic valve is your aorta is this really big freaking, you know, muscular tube right here. This is where pressure is highest in the heart. So we need this to be a very beefy tube compared to some of the other ones. And so it gets these kind of interesting, this little interesting valve here that keeps blood from, you know, backflowing. But you'll notice as that blood like kind of closes up, it heads down these like little tiny tubes right here. Those little tubes are what eventually lead to your coronary arteries. It's kind of hard to see, but yeah, there we go. You can kind of see like this here. So normally it would go, all this would come rushing up, but before it gets to here, this little chamber right here, it's got these little extra little tubes, which are going to supply blood down here, which is really great. But it also like reduces pressure to make sure that you don't ever blow a gasket. But those are your coronary arteries. The big thing you need to know about them is that they're the arteries that supply the myocardium with sufficient oxygen. Coronary heart disease, I'm going to put this here. This is going to show up in the PowerPoint later. But I just think this is a really good spot for it. But coronary heart disease is the buildup of plaque on the inside of the coronary arteries, which diminishes the amount of blood that can flow through the vessels, leading to decreased oxygen delivery. So when you have coronary heart disease, basically you end up with this plaque on the inside of your blood vessels, which is this fatty tissue, and then that reduces pressure. And then if any of those coronary arteries ever gets fully blocked, which is very, very common, you'll have to put in something like a stent. Actually, I'll hold off on that. But that's what we are talking about there. Any questions so far? Pretty good?
Yeah, good.
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Do both atria fill up at the same time and both ventricles let go at the same time, or are they opposite?
Yeah, it kind of goes in a wave, actually. Like, well, I'll pull up, whoops. I'll pull up and show you what I'm talking about. Heartbeat rhythm, systole, diastole. Yeah. Well, that's not squeezing. There we go. So it kind of looks like this. It's like upper. It's not so. It's like upper lower more so than it would be like left right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, good question. I know it's kind of funny. I've had that thought as well. Like, because we teach it, we're like we start, you know, we move like right to left, but the beating kind of goes this way, which actually I guess is what you see in the notes originally, in the way they are in the PowerPoint. It goes atrium, atrium, ventricle, ventricle, which is actually kind of similar to how it looks, but we've got it organized like left to right because I want you to also know the name of the circuits. That's interesting. You just gave me like a different way of considering how to do notes. So let's look at what a cardiac cycle is, right? So cardiac cycle is going to describes the series of events that occur during a heartbeat, right? So when we talk about this, cardiac cycle is going to consist of two main sections. systole and diastole. So systole is the active phase of a heart contraction. It is the, the active phase of a heartbeat. It is the contraction of the heart, okay? Then you've also got diastole, which is going to be the passive phase of a heartbeat. It is the relaxation of the heart. So we have different levels of pressure that are associated with this, and we're going to see these two terms show up again later. But when we look at blood vessels, right, we're constantly talking about blood pressure. We're like, oh man, you got to get your blood pressure down, right? You got to get your blood pressure under control. What we're actually describing is how much pressure is in those walls. If that pressure gets too high, you know, that kind of sounds like a good thing, right? It's like, well, high pressure means that it can get, you know, oxygen can shoot that farther, right? Like that would be a good thing, wouldn't it? Like I want to have sufficient pressure. And it's like, yeah, theoretically, like, yeah, higher pressure means that blood can travel, you know, much more effectively. But the problem is, like, this is a closed circuit, right? Like the start might be here and the end is right over here, like maybe right on the other side. Like it's a big loop that's got to come like all the way around. So if I have an area of high pressure, that means that somewhere else I have an area of low pressure, and that's a bad thing. So when you have high blood pressure, there's two main risks. Number one, you're creating an area of low pressure somewhere else in the body. And this is what you actually see with somebody who has hypertension, somebody who has high blood pressure. You'll see sometimes they'll get up too fast, right? They'll do something where they're like, you know, maybe they're sitting and then all of a sudden they're like, the doorbell rings, and like, oh, I gotta, and then, whoa, you know, all of a sudden like they feel like they're gonna pass out. That's because like oxygen just did not get to the brain. There's a bunch of, you know, high pressure somewhere which reduced pressure to the brain. So what they experienced was a sudden and dramatic drop of blood pressure in the brain, which is bad because your brain goes, whoa, oh, all right, well, I guess we're gonna lay down now, you know. Not awesome. Then the other problem with this is when you have areas of high pressure and low pressure, it can cause your heart to have to squeeze harder in order to like push the same amount of blood through like a smaller tube, which, like I mentioned earlier, could result in hypertrophy of the heart, which is a very, very bad thing. And you can blow a valve, you know, you could literally like damage the blood vessels themselves. They can lose their elasticity, and then that makes them even worse at dealing with pressure. So we definitely want to make sure that we're maintaining a healthy systole and diastole. We want to have a good systolic and diastolic pressure. And that pressure is going to be about 120 in our systole and about 80 units of pressure in our diastole. And that's why healthy blood pressure is 120 over 80. But if it gets as high as like 140 over 90, that is what we consider hypertension. That is what we consider high blood pressure, and we consider it to be very, very dangerous. So let's go ahead and that's our cardiac cycle. So now that we've kind of understand a little bit about that pressure, let's talk about like function of the heart. I would say, I mean, everything we're talking about today is important, but I would say if you are gonna forget most of the lesson today, I'd say the most important for us in terms of like exercise is going to be understanding this section right here. So function of the heart. Let's look at how we measure that, right? So we're going to use a term called cardiac output. Okay, cardiac output is going to be defined as the overall function of the heart. And when I say that, that is literally the term in your NASM textbook. So like, again, like like I said, if you forget everything from today, you may get a question on your test that says the blank is the overall function of the heart. You have 4 options. Right option is going to be cardiac output. So, but what do I mean by that? What do I, you know, that's great to know the definition. It's great to have it memorized and all, but that doesn't really teach us anything. Why is the cardiac output so important? Like, what do I mean? Well, it is a measurement of the amount of blood pumped out of the heart per minute. So a heart that can pump more blood per minute is a more efficient heart. That's what I want, right? So we've got two sections here. It's the amount of blood pumped per minute. So there's two things there that make up your function of the heart. So the other thing that you'll see is cardiac output. It's going to consist of what is called your stroke volume, right? Which is the amount of blood pumped out of the heart per heartbeat, right? So that's going to be your stroke volume, and we're gonna say that is your SV. Okay. Also, your cardiac output is going to be shortened down to Q. I know it should be CO. It's just not. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why. Q stands for quotient. It's the quotient of your heart. But why they did that to new studying students, I don't know why. So, and they actually didn't do it in this version, but I'm going to put this here because this is your regular NASM version. NASM is going to shorten cardiac output to the letter Q. So stroke volume is the amount of blood pumped out of your heart per beat, and then you get your heart rate, right, which is HR, and that is going to be the number of heartbeats per minute. So those two things come together to make up your cardiac output. So now we know that cardiac output, actually I'm going to put this here, or Q, actually no, cardiac output equals heart rate times stroke volume, okay? So that right there is your formula for cardiac output, or sometimes you'll see it listed as Q equals HR times SV, okay? Every now and then you'll see this formula, although it's pretty rare. Now, here's the thing. I just mentioned all this. Oh, we lost Raul. I just mentioned all this, and it is very important. Man, that guy's computer does not like Zoom. And like I said, it is very important, but it's like I can't measure stroke volume, right? Like that's not something that I can effectively like hook you up to a machine while you're in the gym and determine what your stroke volume is. But I do know that if I'm trying to measure cardiac output, I know that these two things are linked together. And I know that like this equals these two things multiplied, right? It's just like let's say for a second, I want to measure like how efficient someone is during their running, right? I can't necessarily very effectively, at least, unless I use like a camera and some seriously complicated math. I can't very effectively measure someone's stride length, right? I mean, I can eyeball it and be like, that looks like you're overstriding. Or I can be like, it looks like you're understriding a little bit. Like I can look at it and kind of eyeball it. But like, in order to be able to measure that, I would need to like take footage, and I'd have to have them do it against like a camera that can effectively measure every single one of their steps. Like that's an incredibly difficult thing to do. But what I can measure is their stride rate, and I can know exactly how far they travel. So for instance, I can measure the number of steps that it took them to travel 100 feet. And if they took them a bunch of steps, I know they're understriding. And if it took them very few steps, I know they are overstriding, right? Because I can know, as long as I know a little bit of information, I can figure out the rest. The same thing is true of the heart. I can't know what your stroke volume is, but if your heart's beating really fast, I can make the assumption that your stroke volume's lower than it should be, because your heart's trying to pump the same volume of blood that would be necessary to keep your body alive, but it has to do it in more beats. That's an inefficient heart, right? So I always like to kind of describe this. I always use the kind of same metaphor here, which is like, if I have to get 1,000 pounds of weights down a hall and I can only carry 10 pounds at a time, I have to make 100 trips. But if I can carry 20 pounds at a time, I only have to make 50 trips. That's more efficient because I'm stronger, Same thing is true of your heart. If your heart's got to deliver X units of blood and it needs to do it at 100 beats, that's less efficient than doing it in 50 beats. Does that make sense? This is why we want a low resting heart rate in general for our clients. This is why a low resting heart rate is a pretty good indicator of how in shape someone's heart is. And it's also why we use heart rate recovery formulas whenever we do certain types of fitness assessments. You know, the 3-minute step test, we're not measuring what your heart rate is at the end of that test, although tests that do that are also effective. We're measuring how quickly your heart rate returns to a slow pace after the test is over. The Rockport walk test is actually one that does measure what your heart rate is after a certain amount of stress. So we measure, you know, we make everyone walk 1 mile's distance, which is the same. And then that allows us to know, you know, what their heart rate, I'm sorry, it doesn't allow us to, we make them walk a mile and then we measure what their heart rate is at the end of that mile. We know everybody walked the same mile. But if your heart rate was higher after a mile or your heart rate was lower after a mile, that's a good score. I'm sorry, that's a bad score or a good score. So that's kind of what we're looking at when we look at like cardiac output and the overall function of the heart. I guess I should put this. Man, I'm off of my own system today. Oh wait, no, nope. I like it being on one line. All right. So let's go ahead and look at like how we actually can, you know, make all this happen. So the heart's conduction system. So let's look at how we generate electric signals. So the heart is comprised. The heart must produce electrical energy in order to stimulate cardiac muscle, right? Just like any other type of muscle, right? We have to be able to zap it in order to make it, you know, create something, create an action potential in order for it to happen. And so we actually have a really cool component in our heart called your sinoatrial node. So the sinoatrial node, or SA node, right, is going to be the pacemaker of the heart, right? This is a special node that regulates the heart's heart rate, right? Or the heart's rate, I guess. So that's the pacemaker of the heart, your SA node. And it lives, it's located in the right atrium. So your SA node is sort of like the conductor of something, right? You know, we even think of, we call this a conduction system, but there's your right atrium right here, and this is your SA node. You can see it's like connected, and it's got these, you know, fibers and wires that kind of run throughout the whole thing, right? And what's going to do is it's going to send a signal, it's going to originate a signal, and then that signal is going to travel down to your AV node, which is actually going to delay that signal for just a second, and that's what allows the top of your heart to contract before the bottom of your heart contracts. And then it's going to blast that signal out to the rest of the device. It's going to travel over here to one of the coolest named things ever because of, it's called your bundle of His. I know it's HIS, so you think it'd be the bundle of His, but it's actually the bundle of His. I don't know why it's pronounced that way, but I think that's so cool. You got a snake heart. And then that's going to expand all the, you know, to all the individual fibers. This is the more muscular contraction, right? This is the stuff pumping blood to the lungs, or, you know, especially this section pumping blood throughout the rest of the body. So we got all these internodal pathways here that really zap all those fibers. But this determines the signal, and it's located right here in the right atrium. As you can see, you've got blood coming in right here from your superior vena. It's called your superior vena cava, which is basically this giant version of a vein that drops blood into this chamber. This is your inferior vena cava right here. And so what's happening is like your sinoatrial node is constantly like testing your blood and like tasting it for whether there's like lots of lactic acid. If your SA node's like, whoo, that is some lactic acid-y blood, I'm gonna go ahead and increase that signal. Right? So as soon as there's more lactic acid running by your SA node, that increases your heart's rhythm. And that increasing in your rhythm now draws more blood and delivers more oxygen. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, cool, lactic acid levels go back down to normal. And you start to like respond to exercise. So that's definitely like an important part of our heart right there. So this starts the signal of the heart. Actually, what's kind of funny about this is like that is sort of what you're looking for in like a defibrillator. Like when you ask people who have never taken CPR before, it's like, what does a defibrillator do? And a lot of times they'll say it starts your heart back up, right? And it's like kind of, but what it actually does, what's kind of funny is a defibrillator stops your heart, which is weird considering it's what saves your life. You're like, wait. Why am I stopping the heart if I'm trying to get someone's heart rhythm going? Well, the thing is, the SA node is like the conductor here. But let's say like that signal gets off for some reason. Like let's say, because, your heart has these really cool sodium potassium pumps, just like anything else. Like that's how we generate electricity. But the ones that are in your heart leak a little bit. And they're meant to leak a little bit because when your heart squeezes, that allows them to actually push things in their concentrations. So what's weird is like you generate your heart signal, but then your heart kind of generates its own signal. It's like a loop. So when your heart squeezes, that moves sodium and potassium and generates a little bit of electricity for the next charge. But the signal's pace is meant to be generated by your SA node. But if these fibers over here, these fibers, anywhere throughout, start getting off in their rhythm, your heart starts quivering, which is what we call fibrillation. So then like the fibers are squeezing all in kind of a random order. And now your heart can't generate pressure effectively, right? Now there's not like a bunch of blood moving and then a bunch of blood moving. There's just little bits all randomly, And so blood's like traveling out of the heart and then maybe it falls back, because it didn't have enough pressure to get actually ejected all the way out of there. So that's what fibrillation is. It's a quivering of the heart. So what you do is you electrocute the crap out of someone and all of a sudden their heart's like, you just reset that whole signal. It's like a blackout traveling down an electric grid in a city, big power surge, shut everything down. And then your SA node's like, all right, everybody's nice and quiet. Let's get back on rhythm. And it restarts the heart at the pace it's supposed to be going. And that's actually what's happening when you use one of the clear, so this whole thing is under the control of your autonomic nervous system. So under the control of the autonomic nervous system, okay? So although the SA node is in charge of setting your heart pace, the nervous and endocrine system can obviously influence this. Your SA node is going to be affected by things like adrenaline, like epinephrine running through your heart, or thyroxine, right? Both of these are things that if they run past that SA node, that will make it pump faster. Or if your sympathetic nervous system decides to like speed up your heart rate, it can, hey, SA node, go faster. Your heart can do that. I'm sorry, your nervous system can do that. This is why, like I mentioned, like you'll hear people, I've had arguments with people in class where they're like, I can control my heart rate. And I'm like, no, you can't. It's like your heart rate is autonomic. And they're like, yeah, but I know how to slow my heart rate down. It's like, no, you know how to think calm thoughts and you know how to meditate, which slows your heart rate down. I have no control over someone else's car. Their foot is on the pedal. But if I jump in front of them, they'll probably slow down. At least I hope so. I didn't take their foot off the gas. I did something that resulted in them taking their foot off the gas. That is your autonomic nervous system. Yes, you can do things that will slow your heart rate down. Like for instance, just go like this. I'm so bad at meditating, I'm already bored. That is, again though, it's so good for you. That will slow your heart rate down. Taking a look here, here's those fibers, by the way. So you can see like you've got the parasympathetic and the sympathetic parts of your nervous system here. You got this one, this is your vagus nerve, right? That's right here at the bottom of your brain. I had a client who had a bum vagus nerve, actually. She was like a teenager, and she had seizures because her vagus nerve didn't function properly. And she had to have this really interesting piece of machinery put in. She wore this bracelet, and she had similar to a pacemaker, right? Like a pacemaker actually kind of acts as your SA node for you. You know, it's an electric thing that they'll usually implant on the other side of your body over here. You'll usually implant it like underneath the skin. And if your pacemaker ever, if your heart ever gets out of rhythm, it'll zap your heart and act as sort of an intense SA node. She actually had something like this installed near her vagus nerve. And it was important for us as her trainers to make sure that we didn't make her make specific motions. I mean, she had gone through training and she knew, but if she ever had like a seizure where that nerve wasn't functioning properly, she had this really interesting bracelet that she could run past her like chin, and it would trigger her vagus nerve to like fire and calm her heart back to a normal range. And so like that was kind of an interesting thing, and we had to like be careful about like what exercises we taught her. And like, you know, like I said, like she was aware of this. She'd been living with this for a few years. But I always thought that was kind of cool. That was an interesting like piece of machinery she had to deal with. So we do have like a lot of different heart treatments for heart disease. I'm gonna move past these really quick because they are not our area. But lifestyle changes obviously is the big, this is our area. But lifestyle change is the best way. If you have somebody who does have heart disease, lifestyle changes are going to be something that are incredibly important to dealing with that heart disease, right? We want to get someone back to neutral, and we can do that through exercise, because your body goes, oh, I guess I do use this cardiovascular system. I need to keep it in good shape. And so your immune system will retrain your heart back to health. But obviously there are lots of medications that people will be on as well. So we do need to be aware of those. And so those are going to be things like statins or anticoagulants. Aspirin's a really good example. Aspirin, if you've ever seen those commercials where Bayer, you know, it says like if somebody's ever having like a heart attack, you know, run and, you know, get them some Bayer, and that can help. It thins out their blood. And so if their heart's having a hard time like pumping, thinning out their blood can make it a little easier to effectively pump stuff around. You've got things like nitroglycerins, which can causes vasodilation, and it makes it easier for things to kind of pump around. Calcium channel blockers. There's a lot of like different things in here, but we need to be aware of a little bit of like the effects that they have. We're never going to be prescribing any of these things. But if I've got a client who's on like a beta blocker, for instance, right? I know that that can do two things. It can lower their heart rate and it can lower their blood pressure. And I need to be aware of that. Because if my client all of a sudden experiences like a dramatic drop in their blood pressure, right, they could pass out. And so like if they start to get a little pale in the face, if they start to just, you know, get spotty vision, things like that, I need to be aware that I should give my client a little bit of rest, sit them down until their blood pressure returns to normal. You definitely don't want to run into a situation where you calculate someone's heart rate and you're like, all right, I want you to be between 140 and 150 today. Put them on a heart treadmill and they're like breathing for their life, like, and their heart rate's like 130, and you're like, we got to keep making it harder. You know, according to this, you got more in you. But they're on like a medication which is artificially lowering their heart. Not awesome. So they might have pacemakers. They might have experienced, you know, an angioplasty or a bypass, a valve replacement. There's a lot of different types of things. Pacemaker, right, is going to be a little like, basically it's monitoring the heart, and it kind of is there if the heart's rhythm ever gets out of pace. This acts as like a super intense SA node and basically zaps their heart. You've got coronary bypass, which is where like this actually is not getting enough blood flow, and so they actually needed to add a second vessel to promote even greater blood flow. You've got this is always so hard to say, but percutaneous transluminal coronary angioplasty. It's a stent. Just way easier to say. But what the balloon is, this is the semi-lunar or transluminal balloon here. Basically, they'll thread a little wire in there that has a balloon around it, and then they'll inflate that balloon, and that'll push all of that plaque and kind of smooth it out. And then oftentimes they can put a stent in afterwards. And a stent is basically this little framework that, puts scaffolding in the blood vessel. It's like, all right, you can never close down again. No more getting blocked. My mom's got a stent in one of her coronary arteries after her heart attack. So those are really, 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 really common treatments for coronary artery disease. Cool. Any questions on any of that, Maggie? Nope. All right, so we're moving on. You notice like we've kind of moved down here. We're still under your cardiovascular system here though. So I'm gonna move over to blood vessels, right? So this is the next section. We're looking at the circulatory part of our cardiovascular system. There's gonna be a lot of terminology in this section that we kind of have to get down and get memorized. Just because you need to be able to talk the talk. So we're gonna look at our different types of blood vessels. You've got a pulmonary and a systemic circuit, which you've already talked about. Then we've got a difference between arteries and veins. We've got arterioles, venules, and capillaries. So some terms here, and we need to know like what direction they're traveling. Then you can see there's a ton of like which systemic arteries and which systemic veins. Knowing that is definitely not something we need to spend too much time on, but we do need to understand like blood pressure changes and things like that. So these are sort of the two primary sections that we'll be spending our time on today. So your vascular system, right? The circulatory system or the vascular system. Like I said, did I? Actually, I mean, I already gave this a definition up here. It is a continuous closed system that transports blood to various tissues throughout the body. So I guess I don't necessarily need to put that. So how did I have this up here? Yeah. So your circulatory system, all your blood vessels. So you can see it's a closed circuit, right? By the way, I'm going to ruin something here. I'm sure somebody watching this video is going to be very upset. But here's like a really good example of why Spider-Man can never exist. So have you ever noticed how they put people in like they'll put astronauts in that thing that spins them around, right? They put them in that chair and then that chair spins them like crazy. The point of that is to see how well their blood vessels can handle changes in pressure, because as you start traveling faster and faster and faster, all your blood's being pushed to like the back of your brain, and like all that blood's like getting pushed to the back, and so now you can't deliver oxygen up in this direction. So if you're on a space shuttle going this way, all your blood's going to get pinned to the bottom and it's going to be stuck down. Now your brain can't get any oxygen, so you're going to pass out. What they're measuring is how quickly you can come back to once that pressure goes back to normal. Spider-Man swinging from like, a massive thing of webbing through New York City, what would happen is as he gets to just about the bottom, all of his blood would be pushed up here and he would instantly pass out and go flying into the pavement. Which is a kind of a bummer to know. Now, here's the thing. Spiders actually do swing like crazy. And, it doesn't look very fast to us. You see a spider like doing its thing. You're like, that's not that impressive. But imagine how tiny that spider is. That's a huge change in pressure compared to that spider. So how the heck do they do that without passing out? Well, they don't have a blood vessel system the way we do. They have an open vascular system, which means that their heart is kind of centrally located in their body. And whenever their heart beats, it kind of just splashes blood everywhere. We have blood vessels. Our blood vessels are closed. They are tubes. And so those tubes need to be able to like travel. And if you push a bunch of blood into one section of the tube and you leave it empty over here, there's no delivery happening in the empty section. And that is why I had to ruin Spider-Man for everyone, even though he is my favorite superhero. I know I talk about Batman a lot, but Spider-Man's my guy. So, so looking at your cardiovascular system, you can see it is uninterrupted, right? This is going to connect somewhere back to here until eventually it gets all the way back to the heart, right? So these are closed circuits. And you've got two main sections, right? You've got your pulmonary circuit, which is, you know, to the lungs, and you've got your systemic circuit, which is going either to the head or to, you know, the organs or to the legs, right? So blood vessel types. We've got 3 different types here. So types of blood vessels. So we have got arteries, which are blood. Am I going to get enough of this? No. All right. Arteries are blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart. Okay, and that's their main purpose, right? Anytime if blood is traveling away from the heart, it is considered an artery. And I know some people get confused by that because they're like, wait a minute, what about coronary arteries? Earlier, you said that those are the arteries that travel, that supply the heart with blood. Yep, but remember, I also said that blood travels out of the chambers and then loops back around to deliver blood to the tissues of the heart, right? The myocardium. So it is traveling out of the heart and then it goes to the tissues, right? Blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart are always going to be your arteries. Arteries are often going to split off into smaller sections, which are called arterioles, which are smaller branches of arteries that eventually split to become capillaries. Okay. What are capillaries? Well, capillaries are microscopic blood vessels that form beds to cover body tissues and act as the exchange site for oxygen and nutrients. Okay, so capillaries are the really small ones. These are forming like these beds that cover your tissues like crazy. I'm trying to find a picture here. I'm not going to get one. Okay, so we're going back and then we're going to Google. All right, so if we look at like a capillary bed, it looks something kind of like this. It is just a series of like branches down. So this would be an artery, this would be an arterial, and then it would get so small that it would become like a capillary. This is actually, I guess this is technically an arterial because it's only branching once. But you can see like this bed right here, this is going to cover your body's tissues like crazy. That's where you're exchanging blood vessels, right? Or that's where you're exchanging blood. So you can see these crazy little microscopic beds here. And sometimes, I love this fact, I think this is so fun. Sometimes your capillary beds, those capillaries get so small, they are sometimes smaller than your red blood cells. Which is crazy because you're like, wait a minute, how could the tube be smaller than the blood cell? Well, that's what's so cool about your blood cells and their interesting little, you know, kind of frisbee shape is that they're able to fold and sometimes fit through those really tiny capillary beds, which, because they had to fold through it, you know what that does? It creates pressure. And that pressure is what drives oxygen into or out of that blood cell. And then all of a sudden it squeezes back in and then works its way to the heart. And that helps us maintain pressure, which is why like capillary beds are so freaking cool. But they're so small, they're easy to break. You've experienced this plenty of times in your life. If you've ever been, you know, if you've ever had a bruise, you basically impacted something so hard that it broke all of your you busted up all the capillary beds. And so blood started hemorrhaging, it started leaking into that area, and you saw it pool under your skin and cause this like little dark site. And then your immune system's got to come by and fix all those blood vessels back up. So those are your capillaries. Then we've got our veins, right? Veins are just like arteries, but they are blood vessels that carry blood toward the heart, right? And the smaller versions of veins are going to be called venules. And these are smaller branches of veins that are formed when capillaries branch together. That works just fine. So in your veins, by the way, you're going to have specialized structures. One thing that's unique to veins Veins will have unique valves in them that prevent blood from backflowing. So one of the things about veins that we got to remember is that they actually have a little special materials in them. So you can see here is like an artery, right? Arteries are really large. They have to be. They're the largest blood vessels you've got because that's where the area of pressure is the highest, especially in something like your aorta, which is the largest valve in your body. The largest vessel in your body. So you can see it's got a lot of muscle in here, right? There's this middle layer, and that's what can cause vasoconstriction, which is your blood vessels closing down, and vasodilation, which is your blood vessels closing up. So after you eat something like a steak dinner, right, all that food's got to be digested. So your digestive system needs to be active and needs to like work to break all that food down. So you're going to experience vasodilation in your digestive system. And then your skeletal muscle is going to, for the most part, feel a little lethargic. And that's why after dinner, you're like, I'm ready for bed. You know, especially after something like Thanksgiving dinner. You get a little tired because like all the blood's going to your digestive system and it's constricting all the things that are there to like, you know, run away from lions and tigers and bears and oh my's. So your veins, their job, because the area of pressure is so much lower, they have these special little valves in them. They have these special little tunics, and that prevents blood from backflowing because the pressure here is really low, right? Like I had a lot of pressure in my artery, but then it had to go through capillaries and deliver all that oxygen. Now there's just not very much pressure to get all that blood back to my heart. So your veins will actually, you know, have these valves that keep them from backflowing. And your veins, because of how little muscular they are, a lot of times actually rely on your muscular system to pump blood upwards for them. For instance, we'll actually see this in your veins of the calf. If you look at the veins inside of your calf, you'll notice, there we go. You'll notice that they actually are situated between your two separate fibers of calf muscles. So whenever your calves squeeze, that actually pushes blood upwards, but then the valves close down, so then it can't travel backwards. So it goes a little higher, and goes a little higher, can't fall backwards, goes a little higher, can't fall backwards, until eventually it gets to a place where there's enough pressure to get sucked back into the heart. And that's why you see people pass out when they lock their knees. We'll look up one version of this because I've definitely spent time doing this before, but locked knees pass out. We'll look up a GIF because that'll be a little quicker. Oh, a wedding, sad. All right, let's do it. Oh, come on now. Oh, there she goes. She's in the front row. And someone's locking out. And boop. Oh! Okay. I missed that. Well, that's what happens. That is why you do not lock your knees. Tons of footage of this happening all the time. People are fine, by the way. Oh, there he goes. So what's happening? Why is that causing someone to pass out? Well, basically, they aren't squeezing any blood back towards their heart. So then all of a sudden their nervous system's like, hey, all my blood's kind of pulling away from my brain and the brain is a priority. So I'm going to make us lay down horizontally and now it's easier for blood to flow. And so it's actually kind of pre-programmed to make us happen, to make that happen. So veins are kind of cool. They have these specialized little valves inside of them. Now, I've already talked about this before, so we don't have to put this in here again. But in your pulmonary circuit, right, those are your pulmonary arteries and all of its branches. And then there's also all kinds of capillaries in your lungs, right? We're going to come back to this when we talk about the respiratory system. But your lungs are covered in blood vessels. And that's where the exchange side of oxygen is actually occurring. You also have pulmonary veins, which are pulling all that blood, back towards the heart. So your pulmonary arteries are blood vessels that go towards the lungs, and your pulmonary veins are blood vessels that go away from your lungs back towards the heart. And then you have your systemic circuit, which is the same thing, just happening throughout all of your body tissues, whether it's going to the digestive system, skeletal muscle, your own cardiac muscle, doesn't matter. Arteries are going away to deliver oxygen to all those tissues, and veins are going towards the heart once all those tissues have kind of used up that oxygen. So you got a couple different layers in your vessels here, which we call like little tunics. But basically they're like little coats that are either, kind of closing down like this, which squeezes them shut, or they're opening up like that, which sort of makes them expand. And all of that is under the control of your autonomic nervous system. You don't have the ability to just like open up your blood vessels at will. I know we could do this a whole bunch and then all of a sudden get more vascular, but that doesn't mean that I have control over it, right? So, and by the way, here's what's kind of cool. Here's a great picture of like a cross section of the two. So you can see like how thick this artery is, right? Much thicker wall that allows it to have an area of higher pressure, and it can, kind of withstand those high intensity forces. So the largest artery that you've got is going to be your aorta. And this is receiving blood straight from your left ventricle, right? That eventually branches out into everything. So when we look at our aorta, it is humongous. It is this branch right here. That's your aorta, right? And then it's going to branch off and go to the brain. It'll branch off and go to the arms, and it'll, like, the reason it's kind of shaped like this, it actually loops up and drops behind the heart, and then drops down and goes to your digestive system, or it splits and goes down to your legs. So that's your main, that is humongous, right? And this area right here, that's called your aortic arch. So going back to here, right? So you get your ascending, you get your arch, you get your thoracic, and you've got your abdominal there. It's got all kinds of different branches, right? Some of it will branch off into your coronary arteries. Some of it will branch off into your brain. Some of it will branch off into your arms, and some of it will branch off into your digestive system and legs. Oh, we do get a picture. I'm sorry. So aortic arch, branch, right? Pretty interesting stuff when you look at it, right? Like you didn't know it had quite so many separate little tubes here going to all of our different like organs and stuff. Now, you've also got the ones that go straight up. For instance, your carotid artery is the one like right on the side of your neck. That's the one that we touch in order to like measure your heart rate, right? You've also got like subclavians, which are all the way over here that branch off this way. So you can see those there, right? Here's all the little miniature versions, right? There's your carotid arteries there. There's your axillary artery, which is going to travel down your arm there. That's the one, there's like a horror movie where this girl gets kidnapped. She's like a nurse, and at one point she like cuts the guy under here, and she's like, and then she just like steps back, and like the guy just kind of, she's like, I just cut your axillary artery. That's it. Yeah, like, and like the guy just like dies, and then she escapes. And it's like, oh man, that part's so cool. But I remember, I think it's like, I can't remember what movie. I think it's like Panic Room or something, some silly movie. But this is why you never want to cut an artery. This is actually why, and like here's your femoral artery, right? That's one that travels all the way down your legs. These are super, super, super important. Actually, Maggie, you've probably talked about femoral arteries before, since you do like boxing and stuff. And you've done kickboxing too, right? Or is it just boxing? Yeah. They teach you like try not to kick somebody in their femoral artery because it can literally kill them. That's why they don't even do that. There's like I was taught that when I used to do stunts, actually, because you can do these what's called a shared nap, and it's where like when you go to slap somebody, you know they put their hand up like this and you hit their hand. You can do shared naps. They'd be really popular back in movies. You can see one in the Karate Kid actually when he's on the beach and he kicks him in the stomach. He kicks him on the inside of the thigh. That's a shared nap, but they stopped doing that because like it can bruise your femoral artery, which is super dangerous. You've also got all kinds of different veins. They do the exact same thing. I'm going to go ahead and move past these a little quick. But you can see here's all the veins running throughout your body, right? They're going to have, these are a little bit less dangerous, but they're gathering blood so they can travel back. The one thing that's kind of unique about your veins, your artery had one central branch that like branched out of the heart, right? And then it kind of split from there. Your veins actually have two areas that they dump blood back into the heart. You've got your superior and inferior, what are called your vena cava. And they're the parts that dump blood back into that right atrium. So some of it's coming from down below and some of it's coming from up top. Here is your hepatic portal system, which is kind of cool. This is where you actually see all the blood vessels that are being gathered from around your digestive system, but particularly one of the most important ones is right here in your liver. Your liver is responsible for like detoxifying things, right? So as like nutrients are getting into your digestive system, the first place that those nutrients go is through your liver. And that way, if anything did get through your digestive system that wasn't supposed to, your liver is basically going to beat it down with a whole bunch of enzymes and hopefully destroy it. Your tissues, all of these blood vessels, particularly your capillaries, they are meant to act as like the exchange site for nutrients, right? So blood exchanges in oxygen, carbon dioxide, and in any other substances are going to take place thanks to these blood vessels here, but a lot of times they'll happen in your tissue's fluids, which we're going to call interstitial fluid. And that fluid allows like things to travel more effectively. Particularly oxygen travels very easily through fluids. This is why it's so important for us to also have a lymphatic system, right? Your lymph nodes and things like that, which are transporting fluids throughout your body. And so capillary exchange is going to take place through like the process of like exchanging nutrients. So if we look at like, if we look at like capillary exchange or nutrient exchange, which is what we can call it, right? Oh boy. We're going to make, this is going to take place mostly through diffusion, but it's how substances such as oxygen and other nutrients are exchanged between cells and capillary. Right? So a great example of this is like diffusion, right? Is going to describes how oxygen will move. Actually, I'll say describe how nutrients will move from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. So, you know, oxygen is going to diffuse down its concentration membrane or concentration gradient. So if I've got like a whole bunch of tissue in my hand that needs some oxygen because maybe I've been gripping a kettlebell, I'm doing like a farmer's carry, right? My hand is getting more and more and more tired. I'm starting to lose my grip because there's only so much diffusion that can take place. Eventually, I'm just not going to be able to deliver enough oxygen to deal with all that lactic acid and hydrogen ions that are building up. And so it's going to start to get fatigued. It's trying to keep up, but there's only so much diffusion that can take place. If you do like regular cardiovascular exercise, type 1 muscle fibers, they have more myoglobin, they have more capillaries, they have more mitochondria, all things that like increase that diffusing capacity. And so that's one of the things that we see in type 1 fibers. They have more blood vessels that cover them. And that's why like they're able to continue working so often. They do tend to be smaller in size because the lactic acid doesn't build up. And then that reduces like how much of a big immune response you're going to have. And so like that's one of the reasons why type 1 muscle fibers are a little bit lower. But that's also why we have 2 subcategories in our type 2 muscle fibers. Your type 2X really don't have that many capillaries. they're just super explosive. Your type 2A, they're like really large because they got the immune response, but they also have some oxygen delivery. So they're semi-enduring. But this is what we're going to see. Your capillaries are going to be covered in lymphatic tissue as well. And that's basically just going to supply fluid to the area to allow this to more effectively push things. And so you can see here's blood pressure, right? Some of the blood pressure is causing oxygen to be, or blood cells to be driven out of the blood vessel into the body's tissues. And then sometimes it's osmotic pressure that moves it back. So in certain blood vessels, you can see where the blood pressure is really high, that is the delivery. And in other versions, the blood pressure is really low. And instead, the osmotic pressure is really high. And that is the blood picking up, right? So a blood cell would, if it has lots of oxygen, deliver a nutrient here. And then once that oxygen's been delivered, it's going to get picked up by that blood vessel so they can travel back. Does that make sense? This is kind of a weird chart. I wish they would have like put a wall in between this or drawn two separate capillaries. You are going to be able to like create this through vasodilation or vasoconstriction, right? That is going to describe like how your blood vessels are either closing down or opening up. I've already kind of talked a little bit about that. That's all regulated by your medulla, by the way, part of your brain. Okay, I must have just talked about it too early. I knew this picture existed. I thought it was this slide, or I thought it was this PowerPoint. So it doesn't always do this through your blood vessels constricting or contracting. Sometimes it's because your muscles are constricting or contracting. So here's the example of your calves. By the way, check out this guy's calves, right? Friggin' Adonis over here. But you can see like, you know, he's gonna squeeze his calves and that's gonna send blood up back towards his heart. Calves like that, he's lucky it doesn't blow his heart up. So your pulse, right, is going to, you know, be created by your heart. What we are measuring when we measure your pulse is we are measuring we usually measure it in two places, right? We're either measuring your carotid pulse, which is as your heart contracts, it basically blood's pushing out on your carotid artery, right? Or we're going to measure it in your radial pulse, which is your radial artery that travels down your wrist. Those are sort of our two favorite places. I can't remember what the one in your thumb is called. It's part of your radial artery, but once it gets here, this is actually one of my favorite places to measure mine, is I'll just take my middle finger and drop it down. I got a huge blood vessel right here. So I'll make like a little Spider-Man or like a heavy metal symbol, and I'll sometimes measure my pulse if I don't want to, like if I'm weird about like, you know, measuring my heart rate in public, I'll sometimes do that version. So your pulse is going to be affected by like a lot of things. It could just be your individual body shape, age, gender, muscular activity, even your emotion can affect your body pulse. If you tend to be like really antsy, your pulse will generally be a little bit higher. Okay, so now we got to kind of, last thing we got to look at is blood pressure. Right? And what that is it's going to be the force, the amount of force exerted by blood against blood vessel walls. So that's what your blood pressure is, right? This is going to be determined by two things. Your cardiac output, remember your stroke volume, right? If your heart's pumping a ton of blood, pressure is going to be a little bit higher. But it's also going to be determined by like how much resistance there is in your blood flow. So if there's plaque on the inside of those walls, that's going to mean there's more resistance because the tube is smaller. There's less space for the same amount of blood to travel through. So this is what your blood pressure looks like in your various different tissues running throughout the body. Your aorta, remember that's the big muscular part, this is where pressure is highest. This is actually what we are measuring when we're measuring blood pressure. When they put the blood pressure cuff on you, they're measuring an area where the pressure is relatively high. And what we want to see is the difference between your systolic blood pressure, remember that's the contraction of the heart, and your diastolic pressure, that's the relaxation of the heart, okay? So you have systole and diastole, the heart pumped, the heart relaxed, right? We want to see a difference between those two. We want those numbers to be about 120/80. So systolic blood pressure is the amount of pressure exerted on a wall during the contraction of the heart. Healthy systolic pressure is considered to be 120 millimeters of mercury per gram. I couldn't remember if the H was capitalized or not. So that's when we're using it, we're measuring a thing of 120 millimeters of mercury. So 120 units of pressure, basically. And then your diastolic is the amount of pressure exerted on a wall during the relaxation of the heart. Healthy diastolic pressure is considered to be 80 millimeters of mercury. So obviously there's different resistances that can be out there, right? Your blood's viscosity could be even part of this. Like if you're dehydrated, your blood's sticky. There's less fluid running throughout your blood. Or maybe you have like low blood volume. Maybe you just haven't been producing very much blood cells, right? Maybe you could be anemic. All of these things can affect your blood pressure, right? You can have too low of blood pressure. That's not great either, right? But systolic pressure normally is about 120, and that occurs during your heart's contraction. Diastolic pressure occurs during your heart's relaxation, okay? And we use this using a word that I've practiced saying a million times because it's a silly word, but it's usually measured it's measured using a blood pressure cuff, which is the official name is a sphygmomanometer. Sphygmomanometer. Look at that freaking word. Blood pressure cuff. So that is actually how we measure that. And there you can see it right there, right? Basically, there's a little air compartment that you squeeze this little pump. That increases the air. And then what happens is like you're going to take the pressure up high. And at one point, you are going to hear the pulse disappear. That is actually going to be your 80. So you will not be able to hear someone's heart rate in the beginning when you just put the stethoscope on their arm. You won't be able to hear anything, and then you're going to start pumping, and all of a sudden you'll hear their heart rate. That when you first hear it, that's your diastolic blood pressure. That's the low number. Then you're going to keep pumping, and it's going to go higher and higher and higher, and eventually you will stop hearing it again. And that will be actually where your systolic pressure is. But that's not how you want to measure it. You want to measure it on the way back. So what you do is then you like you turn this little knob here, and that all of a sudden lets this start deflating. You're basically letting the air out really slowly, and you're going to count as soon as you hear the heart rate again, that's the systolic pressure. And then you're going to keep paying attention, and as soon as the heart disappears, that's the diastolic pressure. So you pump it beyond, and then you hear it, that's the 120, and then it disappears, that's the 80. That's how we actually use these things. So normal blood pressure, like I said, normal blood pressure is 120 over 80, right? Hypertension is blood pressure at or above 140 over 90. So this is what we consider high blood pressure, which has a ton of dangerous health, effects. Now there is also high essential hypertension. Your blood pressure is going to go way beyond 140 over 90 all the time. Like during a deadlift, for instance, your blood pressure is going to shoot up like crazy. And that's okay. That's what we call essential hypertension. It's the type of hypertension that needs to occur beyond normal ranges in order to allow us to do active processes. But it should return to normal afterwards, which is why you don't want to like measure your blood pressure. You don't want to jog to the doctor's office and then sit down and like measure your blood pressure. They're going to go, oh, get this person to the ER. So there are all kinds of different vascular disorders out there. Again, not things that we're going to spend too much time talking about, but we do have like arteriosclerosis or atherosclerosis, right? That is basically your blood vessels getting damaged slowly over time, the buildup of fatty tissues and things like that. You get experiencing hemorrhaging or shock or thrombosis, varicose veins. All of these things are different disorders, right? So here's atherosclerosis here. A normal artery looks like this, and then it starts getting what's called a fatty streak, which builds up plaque. And eventually that reduces blood flow so much that, you know, there could be almost no blood going through there. If this happens in a coronary artery, I mean, this is bad everywhere in the body, but if it happens in your coronary arteries, you are now limiting the supply of the thing that pumps blood throughout your body. That's why it's so dangerous. We have an aneurysm here, which is where if a blockage happens and then it actually starts to bulge a blood vessel, eventually that can cause like that blood vessel to burst. And then we also have like varicose veins, which you can see here. That's actually where veins, remember they had those valves, right? But if that valve fills up with blood and then somehow, you know, you squeeze your muscle and it pumps more blood in there, but it didn't, your heart wasn't strong enough to pull that blood back towards your heart, it all starts pooling and eventually can stretch out your veins. And it can be very, very, very painful. And that is about it when it comes to blood vessels. Do you have any questions? Maggie, feeling good? Questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah, I understand it. Thanks.
Cool. Well, that's all I got for you today. Let's go ahead and do this, and I'll end the call. See everybody tomorrow.